always thought I knew what betrayal looked like. A text message discovered at 2 a.m., lipstick on a collar, the classic signs we all expect. But for me, betrayal was a slow dance at my college roommate's wedding, with everyone watching as my wife of 5 years smiled up at another man like I had ceased to exist. My name is Ethan Miller. For 8 years, I was married to Madison, a marketing executive with a smile that could light up rooms and a laugh that once made my heart skip. We lived in Chicago's Lincoln Park neighborhood in a renovated brownstone that cost more than I care to admit. I run a successful architectural firm downtown. We were that couple everyone thought had it all figured out, until Derek Sullivan entered the picture. Or rather, until I finally noticed he'd been in the picture all along. We met Madison and I in our final year at Northwestern. I was studying architecture. She was in the business school. We crossed paths at a mutual friend's house party, one of those cramped apartment gatherings where the music's too loud and the drinks are too cheap. I noticed her immediately. Everyone did. Madison Reynolds, with her golden brown hair and confidence that radiated like heat. She was laughing at something someone had said, head thrown back, completely uninhibited. I remember thinking, I want to make her laugh like that. It took 3 weeks of carefully orchestrated accidental meetings before I worked up the courage to ask her out. To my surprise, she said yes immediately, as if she'd been waiting for me to ask. Our first date was at a little Italian place in Evanston. Red checkered tablecloths, candles stuck in Chianti bottles. The works. We talked until the owner politely kicked us out at closing time. The early years were everything young love should be. Passionate, consuming, filled with grand plans for the future. We moved in together after graduation, a tiny one-bedroom with a leaky faucet and unreliable heat. But it was ours. I was working entry-level at a prestigious firm, Madison climbing the ranks at a marketing agency. We were building something together. The proposal came 3 years in, on the shore of Lake Michigan at sunrise. I'd planned it for months, the perfect ring, the perfect moment. She cried when I knelt in the sand, said yes before I could even finish asking the question. The wedding was the following spring, lavish but tasteful, just like Madison herself. We were happy, truly happy, for years. Sure, we had the normal disagreements any couple has. Money, schedules, whose turn it was to empty the dishwasher, but nothing that ever made me question us. Madison was ambitious, driven, sometimes stressed, but always came home to me. I was her rock, she said, her safe harbor in the storm of her high-pressure career. That's why, when the changes began, they were so subtle I almost missed them. A canceled dinner here, a late night at the office there, her phone suddenly password protected when it never had been before. Each instance on its own meant nothing. Together they formed a pattern I couldn't ignore. Derek was Madison's friend from college. Just friends, she'd always insisted. He worked at a rival marketing firm, and they'd meet for coffee to discuss industry trends. I never worried. I trusted Madison completely. That was my first mistake. The signs were subtle at first. Madison's phone would light up at odd hours, and she'd smile that secret smile before responding to texts. When I asked who it was, the answer was always casual. Oh, just Derek with another work crisis. Her eyes would linger on her phone a moment too long. She'd laugh just a little too hard at his jokes when we all went out together. I first met Derek at an industry event Madison had dragged me to, some marketing awards ceremony where everyone wore black and drank too much champagne. He approached us at the bar, all perfect teeth and designer suit, confidence rolling off him in waves. Madison Reynolds, he'd said, as if tasting her name. Still stealing all the best clients in Chicago? Madison's face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in weeks. Derek Sullivan, still pretending you know what you're doing? Their banter continued, inside jokes and professional rivalries I couldn't possibly understand. I stood there, Madison's hand in mine but feeling increasingly invisible. Derek acknowledged me eventually. A firm handshake. Madison's told me so much about you that somehow felt hollow. I disliked him immediately but couldn't articulate why. He was charming, successful, seemingly harmless. Just an old friend from college who happened to work in Madison's field. After that night, Derek became a more frequent presence in our lives. Work lunches with Madison turned into after-work drinks, Professional consultations became weekend coffee meetings. I told myself it was nothing, just networking, just career stuff. Madison had always been ambitious. It was at James and Victoria's dinner party last October when I first felt that twinge of something wrong. Madison and Derek stood by the kitchen island, their shoulders touching, speaking in low voices. Nothing inappropriate, nothing I could call out, but there was an intimacy there that made my stomach tighten. "They seem close," I remarked to Victoria as she refilled my whiskey. Victoria glanced over and hesitated before responding. "They've always been close," she said carefully. Too carefully. "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice sharper than intended. Victoria looked uncomfortable. "Nothing, Ethan. Just that they've been friends for years, that's all." But I knew Victoria well enough to read between the lines. There was something she wasn't saying, something perhaps everyone knew but me. That night I watched Madison more closely. The way she leaned toward Derek when he spoke, the casual touches on his arm, the private jokes. Each observation was like a paper cut, individually minor, collectively damning. On the drive home, Madison was unusually quiet, staring out the passenger window at Chicago's glittering skyline. "You and Derek seem to have a lot to talk about tonight," I said, trying to sound casual. Madison didn't look at me. "We were just catching up." "About work?" "Among other things." "What other things?" She sighed. "Life, Ethan. We talked about life. Is that a crime?" "Of course not," I said, tightening my grip on the steering wheel. "I'm just curious." "Well, don't be. There's nothing to be curious about." But there was, and that night marked the beginning of my careful observations. I didn't confront her directly. Not yet. Instead, I started paying attention to patterns. Madison's work dinners that ran late, the way she'd step outside to take certain calls, how she'd suddenly guard her phone, positioning it away from me when texting. I started logging these occurrences in the Notes app on my phone. November 12th, Madison said she was working late, but her company Instagram showed their office closed early for a plumbing issue. November 19th, checked her location. She wasn't at the restaurant where she said she was meeting clients. November 24th, Derek posted a photo at the same cocktail bar Madison claimed she was at with the girls. The evidence was circumstantial but mounting. I was becoming someone I didn't recognize. Suspicious, vigilant, cataloging my wife's movements. But something inside me had shifted. I needed to know the truth, whatever it might be. One evening in early December, Madison left her laptop open when she went to shower. I'd never snooped before, never had reason to. But something pulled me toward that glowing screen. Her email was open. I scrolled through, my heart pounding in my chest, and there it was, an email chain with Derek, buried among work correspondence. Nothing explicit, nothing I could point to as definitive proof. But the tone, the inside jokes, the "can't wait to see you tomorrow," the "miss your face," it all painted a picture of a relationship that went beyond professional boundaries, beyond what I could reasonably accept as friendship. I dug deeper, scanning months of messages. There were innocent ones mixed in with the suspicious, genuine work questions, professional advice, but increasingly the personal overtook the professional. "Thinking of you during this boring meeting. Still wearing that blue shirt I like? Last night was exactly what I needed." Last night, when Madison had told me she was having dinner with her team to celebrate landing a new client, when she'd come home at midnight, smelling of wine and wearing a satisfied smile I'd attributed to professional success. I closed the laptop and returned to my side of the bed before Madison finished her shower. That night, lying next to her in the dark, listening to her breathe, I felt like I was sleeping next to a stranger. I spent that sleepless night contemplating my options. I could confront her immediately, demand explanations, throw accusations. I could follow her, catch them in the act, create a scene worthy of a daytime soap opera. I could pretend I knew nothing, suffer in silence, hope it was a phase that would pass. None of these options appealed to me. The first would lead to denials, gaslighting, making me seem like the unreasonable one. The second was beneath my dignity. And the third, well, I've never been one for martyrdom. No, I needed a fourth option, one that would allow me to maintain control, protect myself, and ensure that whatever happened next would be on my terms, not hers. I needed time, information, a plan. The next morning over breakfast, I watched her spread avocado on her toast with precise movements, her diamond wedding ring catching the morning light. 8 years of memories flashed through my mind. Our first apartment with the leaky faucet, vacations in Maine, lazy Sunday mornings with coffee and crosswords. Had it all been a lie? Or had we simply drifted apart without my noticing? "Everything okay?" Madison asked, catching me staring. "Just thinking about how much has changed," I replied truthfully. She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "Us. We used to tell each other everything." Madison put down her knife. "We still do." "Do we?" A flash of something, guilt, annoyance, crossed her face. "Where is this coming from, Ethan?" I shrugged. "Nowhere. Just an observation." She studied me for a moment. "You've been weird lately, distant." The irony wasn't lost on me. "Have I? I hadn't noticed." Madison sighed, checking her watch. "I have a meeting. Can we talk about whatever this is later?" "Sure," I said. "Later." But later never seemed to come. Madison worked late that night, and the next. The distance between us grew, a chasm widening inch by inch. December in Chicago brings a particular kind of cold. Bone deep, uncompromising, transforming the city into something both beautiful and brutal. I spent more time at the office, buried in projects, coming home to an empty house more often than not. When Madison and I did occupy the same space, conversation was superficial, tension humming beneath the surface. "We should plan a vacation," Madison said one night over takeout Thai food, her suggestion delivered to the door because she was too tired to go out. "Maybe after the holidays, somewhere warm." "Sure," I agreed, though we both knew it wouldn't happen. "Any place in mind?" "I don't know. Mexico? The Caribbean?" She pushed her pad thai around with her fork, not really eating. "We haven't had a real vacation in ages." "Whose fault is that?" I couldn't help asking. Madison's eyes snapped to mine. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I backpedaled, not ready for a confrontation. "Just that we're both busy. Hard to coordinate schedules." She studied me for a moment longer before returning to her food. "Right. Schedules." That night I lay awake again, listening to Madison's even breathing beside me. We'd been married 8 years, and for the first time, I wondered if we'd make it to 9. I knew I had choices. I could confront Madison directly. I could demand the truth about Derek. I could play the wounded husband, the angry cuckold. But something in me resisted that narrative. If my marriage was ending, and increasingly it seemed it was, I wouldn't be the pathetic figure in the story. I'd be prepared. I'd be in control. So I began preparing. First, a consultation with Andrew Blackwell, reputed as the best divorce attorney in Chicago. I took an extended lunch break and drove to his downtown office, paying cash for the consultation. Andrew's office was exactly what you'd expect from a high-powered divorce attorney. Corner suite, floor-to-ceiling windows, furnishings that whispered expensive rather than shouted it. The man himself was in his 50s, silver-haired, with the sharp eyes of someone who'd seen every possible way a marriage could implode. "Illinois is an equitable distribution state," Andrew explained, his office overlooking Millennium Park. "That means marital assets are divided fairly, not necessarily equally." "Define fairly," I said. "That's where it gets complicated. The court considers multiple factors: length of the marriage, contributions of each spouse, financial circumstances, and so on. And infidelity?" Andrew leaned back in his chair. "Honestly, less relevant than most people think. Illinois is a no-fault divorce state, unless there's been significant dissipation of marital assets, like if she's spending your money on her lover. The court generally doesn't care who cheated on whom." I nodded, taking notes. "What should I be doing now?" "Document everything. Secure copies of all financial records, bank statements, investment accounts, property deeds. Start setting aside liquid funds if you can do so without raising suspicion. And most importantly, don't move out of your home, no matter how tense things get. It can complicate property claims." "The house is primarily in my name," I explained. "I used inheritance money for the down payment." "That's good. Keep documentation of that separate. It could be considered non-marital property, depending on how it was handled during the purchase. Andrew studied me for a moment. You seem very composed for someone in your situation. What's the alternative? Falling apart won't solve anything. He nodded approvingly. You'd be surprised how many clients come in here unable to think clearly. Emotions cloud judgment. You're taking the right approach. I've always been practical, I replied, though we both knew this went beyond practicality. This was self-preservation. Over the next few weeks, I followed Andrew's advice meticulously. I opened a separate bank account at a different bank. I downloaded and secured copies of all our financial records. I updated my will, removing Madison as beneficiary, began transferring small amounts of money, nothing suspicious, nothing that would trigger alerts, into my private account. I researched our house deed, confirming what I already knew. The property was primarily mine due to the inheritance used for the down payment. I cataloged our major assets, from the artwork on our walls to Madison's extensive jewelry collection. I made copies of tax returns, investment statements, retirement accounts. Knowledge was power, and I intended to be very powerful indeed, all while maintaining the facade of normalcy at home. I made dinner. I asked about Madison's day. I watched TV beside her on the couch, a respectable distance between us. I was the model husband, even as I methodically prepared for our marriage's end. I considered hiring a private investigator, but decided against it. Too messy, too obvious. Instead, I became my own investigator. I installed a tracking app on Madison's phone under the guise of a security update. Simple, undetectable, effective. I noted her patterns, the increasing frequency of work meetings that coincided with Derek's absence from his office, according to his company's Instagram, which I now monitored religiously. The weeks leading up to Christmas were a masterclass in pretense. We attended holiday parties together, Madison on my arm, laughing and charming as always. We exchanged thoughtful gifts on Christmas morning, a vintage watch for me, a diamond bracelet for her. We visited her parents in Springfield for 2 tense days, where I watched her check her phone constantly, stepping outside for work calls that left her cheeks flushed despite the cold. December bled into January. Chicago was buried under snow, the city transformed into a monochromatic landscape of white and gray. Madison and I moved around each other like ghosts, occupying the same space, but rarely connecting. January brought a new phase to my plan. While Madison was on a business trip to New York, one I strongly suspected included Derek, given his own sudden absence from Chicago, I met with a financial advisor to discuss protecting my assets. I consulted a therapist, not for emotional support, though perhaps I needed it, but to establish a record of my mental state and the strain Madison's behavior was placing on me. I spoke privately with several of our closest friends, careful not to accuse directly, but to express concern about Madison's increased absences and changed behavior. I was building a narrative, not a false one, but a carefully curated version of the truth that would serve me when the time came. Then came the invitation to Ryan and Sarah's wedding. Ryan was Madison's colleague, which meant Derek would certainly be there. I watched Madison's face light up when the embossed invitation arrived, and I knew immediately that this wedding would be significant, though I couldn't have known how significantly it would alter the course of our lives. We should RSVP, yes, right? Madison said, already reaching for her phone to text Sarah. Of course, I replied. Wouldn't miss it. The wedding was set for February 14th, Valentine's Day. How fitting that the day celebrating love would become the stage for our marriage's final act. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, Madison seemed almost giddy. She spent hours shopping for the perfect dress, a deep red number that hugged her figure. She scheduled hair appointments, nail appointments, even a facial. Her enthusiasm might have seemed normal to anyone else. Who doesn't enjoy getting dressed up? But I knew better. This wasn't about celebrating Ryan and Sarah. This was about seeing Derek. I made my own preparations. I contacted a locksmith, scheduling a lock change for the evening of the wedding. I arranged for movers to pack Madison's personal belongings while we were out and store them in our garage. I drafted emails to our families explaining our separation, not to send yet, but to have ready. I prepared a new account in Madison's name, ready to transfer half our liquid assets with the click of a button. Everything was in place. All that remained was the catalyst, which I strongly suspected the wedding would provide. The day of the wedding arrived with a fresh snowfall that covered Chicago in a pristine white blanket. Madison hummed as she got ready, applying makeup with careful precision. I watched her from the bathroom doorway, this beautiful woman who had once been my whole world. "You look nice," she said, catching my reflection in the mirror. I was already dressed in my suit, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored. "So do you," I replied, meaning it. Madison had always been stunning. That had never been our problem. We took an Uber to the Drake Hotel, where the ceremony and reception were being held. Madison was uncharacteristically chatty during the ride, pointing out landmarks as if I hadn't lived in Chicago for over a decade. Nervous energy. I recognized it, understood its source. The Drake is old Chicago wealth, all polished brass and marble, crystal chandeliers and thick carpets. The ceremony was held in the grand ballroom, transformed for the occasion with cascading white flowers and twinkling lights. Madison fidgeted throughout, her eyes constantly scanning the room. Looking for Derek, no doubt, but he wasn't there. The ceremony was elegant, if forgettable. I watched Ryan and Sarah exchange vows, surrounded by flowers and candles. Madison sat beside me, dabbing at her eyes during the vows. I wondered if she was thinking about our wedding day, if she felt any remorse for how far we'd fallen from those hopeful beginnings. It was at the reception that everything unraveled. Derek arrived late, having missed the ceremony due to a work emergency. He slid into the seat across from us at our assigned table, looking polished in a blue suit that matched his eyes. "Sorry I'm late," he said, his smile directed entirely at Madison. "Client crisis." "You didn't miss much," Madison replied with a familiarity that made my jaw clench. "Just two people promising to love each other forever." Derek laughed. "How boring." I took a long sip of my whiskey, observing them over the rim of my glass. They were barely trying to hide it anymore. The shared glances, the inside jokes, the way their hands brushed when Derek passed Madison a glass of champagne. Dinner was served. Salmon for Madison, steak for Derek and me. I barely tasted my food, washing each bite down with more whiskey. Around us, other guests chatted and laughed. The happy couple made their rounds, stopping at each table to thank their guests. When they reached us, Sarah hugged Madison tightly. "I'm so glad you're here," she said. "Both of you," she added, glancing at me almost as an afterthought. "Wouldn't have missed it," Madison replied warmly. After dinner came the dancing. The band struck up a cover of At Last, and Ryan led Sarah onto the dance floor for their first dance. Madison watched them with a wistful expression that I couldn't quite interpret. Regret, longing, envy. When the dance floor opened to all guests, Derek immediately turned to Madison. "Shall we?" he asked, extending his hand. Madison glanced at me, the briefest acknowledgement of my existence, before taking Derek's hand. "We shall." They moved to the dance floor, joining the growing crowd of swaying couples. I remained at the table, nursing my drink, watching as Derek placed his hand on the small of Madison's back, pulling her closer than was strictly necessary. One song bled into another. Madison and Derek remained on the dance floor, their bodies moving in perfect sync. She laughed at something he said, throwing her head back in that way that used to make my heart race. Now it just made my stomach turn. I wasn't the only one noticing. At a nearby table, Victoria and her husband James were watching the spectacle with uncomfortable expressions. Victoria caught my eye and offered a sympathetic smile. I raised my glass in a mock toast, keeping my face carefully neutral. I wouldn't give anyone the satisfaction of seeing me hurt. I excused myself to the bar, needing space, needing air that wasn't perfumed with Madison's familiar scent. The bartender poured me another whiskey without being asked. "Tough night?" he asked with the practiced empathy of someone who'd witnessed countless marital tensions from behind his station. "You could say that," I replied, dropping a 20 in his tip jar. "Been doing this job 20 years, he said, wiping down the counter. "Seen it all. Weddings bring out the best in some people, the worst in others." I nodded, grateful for the meaningless conversation, the momentary distraction. Back at the table, Madison and Derek had finally returned, both slightly flushed from dancing. "You should join us, Ethan," Madison said, her voice artificially bright. "The band is great." "I'm fine here," I replied. "Someone has to guard the table." Derek laughed as if I'd said something hilarious. "Always the responsible one, aren't you, Ethan?" There was something in his tone, condescension wrapped in fake camaraderie, that made my hand tighten around my glass. "One of us has to be," I replied evenly. Madison shot me a warning look. "Ethan!" "What?" "It was a compliment." Derek smirked, clearly enjoying the tension. "No offense taken. That's why you two work so well together, right? Madison brings the fun, Ethan keeps things stable." "Is that what we're calling it now?" I couldn't help asking. "Fun?" Madison's smile faltered. "I need another drink," she announced, standing abruptly. "Derek?" "Right behind you," he said, following her to the bar. I watched them walk away, their heads tilted toward each other in intimate conversation. Something inside me hardened, a resolve crystallizing. This charade had gone on long enough. I discreetly checked my phone. A text from the locksmith. Job complete. Another from the moving company. Items packed and stored in garage as requested. I sent the prepared transfer of funds to Madison's new account. Exactly half of our joint savings. Not a penny more or less. I drafted a quick email to my attorney, instructing him to send the prepared separation notice to Madison's email at precisely 11 p.m. Everything was in place. Now I just needed to wait. When Madison and Derek returned, Madison was noticeably more relaxed, the edge of a few cocktails smoothing her movements. She placed a fresh whiskey in front of me, a peace offering I didn't want. "The Wilsons were asking about you," she said, referring to mutual friends. "I told them about your new project downtown." "That's nice," I said flatly. Madison frowned. "Can you at least pretend to be having a good time, for Sarah and Ryan's sake?" "I'm having a great time," I replied. "Watching my wife dance with another man all night is exactly how I wanted to spend Valentine's Day." Derek had the audacity to look uncomfortable, as if he were an innocent bystander in this drama. "Maybe I should check out the dessert table," he said, starting to rise. "No, stay," I said, my voice low. "Don't let me interrupt whatever this is." Madison's face flushed with anger. "Ethan, you're embarrassing yourself." "Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, I'm not the one who should be embarrassed." She leaned in, hissing through clenched teeth. "This is not the time or place." "When is the time, Madison? When you're not working late? When you're not meeting the girls? When you're actually home for once?" Derek cleared his throat. "I think I'll give you two some privacy." "Privacy," I repeated with a humorless laugh. "That's rich coming from you." Madison grabbed my arm. "Enough!" I shook her off, standing. "You're right. It is enough." I drained my whiskey in one burning swallow. "Enjoy your evening, both of you." I walked away, feeling their eyes on my back. Instead of leaving the reception, I found a quiet corner, near the bar where I could watch the room. Madison remained at the table, her head bent close to Derek's. They spoke intensely for a few minutes before Derek apparently said something that made her laugh. Just like that, the tension dissolved, and they were back on the dance floor. I ordered another whiskey and settled in to observe. This wasn't how I'd planned for the evening to unfold, but perhaps it was better this way. Let them think I was sulking. Let them think they'd won this round. It would make what came next all the more satisfying. As the night progressed, Madison and Derek grew bolder. Their dancing became more intimate, his hands lingering on her waist, her fingers playing with the hair at the nape of his neck. They were putting on a show, and everyone was watching, including several of Madison's colleagues who knew very well that I was her husband. Around midnight, after the cake had been cut and the bouquet thrown, I was approached by James, Victoria's husband and one of my oldest friends. "Hey," he said, claiming the bar stool next to mine. "Rough night," I shrugged. "Just another wedding." James glanced toward the dance floor, where Madison was now swaying in Derek's arms to a slow ballad. "Ethan, man." "I don't know what to say." "Nothing to say," I replied, signaling the bartender for another round. "Look, Victoria and we've noticed things. For a while now. We didn't know how to bring it up." I turned to look at him directly. "How long have you known?" James shifted uncomfortably. Known what exactly? Don't play dumb, James. It doesn't suit you, he sighed. Suspicions mostly. Madison and Derek have always been close, but lately, he trailed off. Vicky saw them together at Lakeshore Park a few weeks ago, holding hands. She wasn't sure if she should tell you. She should have, I said, my voice flat. Would it have made a difference? Honest question. I considered this. Maybe not, but friends tell friends when their wives are cheating on them. James winced at my bluntness. We weren't sure, and you and Madison have been together so long. We thought maybe it was just a rough patch. The bartender delivered our drinks. I raised mine in another mock toast. Here's to rough patches. James clinked his glass against mine hesitantly. What are you going to do? I took a slow sip, savoring the burn. What makes you think I haven't already done it? James studied me with newfound wariness. Ethan, don't worry about it, I said, patting his shoulder. Just watch. As if on cue, a commotion erupted from the dance floor. Madison's voice, louder than appropriate for the setting, carried across the room. Ethan, he's over there somewhere, probably brooding. Her laugh was too shrill, too forced. He's always been boring at parties. That's why I'm dancing with Derek instead. A few uncomfortable chuckles from bystanders. Derek, to his credit, looked mortified. Maddie, maybe we should sit down, he suggested, trying to guide her off the dance floor. She resisted. Why? I'm having fun. Ethan never lets me have fun. I felt James tense beside me. Shit, Ethan, she's drunk. Very observant, I replied calmly, making no move to intervene. You're just going to let her make a scene? She's a grown woman making her own choices, I said. Who am I to interfere? On the dance floor, Madison was continuing her performance. You know what I realized, Derek? This marriage thing, it's not even real anymore. It's just, what's the word? Formality. She gestured wildly, nearly hitting another guest. Ethan's too boring for me. Always has been. I just didn't want to admit it. Sarah, the bride, approached them now, her face tight with concern. Madison, honey, maybe we should get some water. Madison shrugged her off. I'm fine. I'm celebrating. We're all celebrating love, right? Well, I'm celebrating the realization that I don't love my husband anymore. A collective intake of breath from those nearby. Derek looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. Madison, stop, he pleaded. Why? It's true. Ethan's just there, like furniture. Reliable, sturdy, boring furniture. She laughed at her own metaphor. You, though, she said, poking Derek's chest. You're exciting. You make me feel alive. I felt James's hand on my shoulder. Ethan, man, you should stop this. I shook my head. No, let her finish. This isn't right, James insisted. She's making a fool of herself. And me, I added. Don't forget that part. Meanwhile, Madison was still holding court on the dance floor, though the music had stopped and the band was watching awkwardly. You know what's funny? She was saying to anyone who would listen. Ethan thinks I don't know he knows. Like he's so clever with his little investigations. Checking my phone when I'm in the shower. Following my location. As if I care anymore. She turned in a circle, searching the room. Where is he? Ethan, come out, wherever you are. Let's tell everyone how our marriage is a sham. Several people were now looking in my direction, expressions ranging from pity to morbid curiosity. I remained perfectly still, my face a mask of composure. Derek finally managed to take Madison by the arm, firmly this time. That's enough, he said, no longer gentle. You're embarrassing everyone, including yourself. Madison looked shocked at his tone. But I thought, not like this, Derek said. Never like this. I stood then, straightening my tie. Showtime, I murmured to James. Ethan, wait, he said, grabbing my arm. Don't do anything you'll regret. I gave him a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I never do. I crossed the room with measured steps, aware of every eye tracking my movement. Madison saw me coming, and her expression shifted from surprise to defiance. There he is, she announced. The boring husband. I stopped a few feet away from her, hands in my pockets, utterly relaxed. Madison, you seem upset. She laughed, the sound sharp and brittle. Upset? No, I'm liberated. Finally telling the truth. The truth, I repeated. Interesting concept. Derek tried to intervene. Ethan, man, she's not herself right now. I turned to him, my gaze arctic. Don't speak to me. Not now. Not ever again. He stepped back, something in my demeanor finally penetrating his false concern. I returned my attention to Madison. You wanted to tell everyone the truth about our marriage? Go ahead, I'm listening. She faltered, my calm reaction clearly not what she expected. You know what I'm talking about. Do I? I tilted my head. Why don't you spell it out for everyone, since you're so eager to share? Madison glanced around, suddenly aware of our audience. The entire reception had ground to a halt, all eyes on our drama. Even the bride and groom were watching in stunned silence. This isn't the place, she muttered. Oh, but you made it the place, I replied. So finish what you started. Tell everyone how you've been sleeping with Derek behind my back for... How long has it been exactly? Gasped from the onlookers. Derek's face drained of color. That's not... We haven't... Madison stammered. No? My mistake then. I smiled, cold and precise. Perhaps you've just been emotionally cheating, planning to leave me, laughing about me behind my back. Is that more accurate? Tears filled Madison's eyes. From humiliation or guilt, I couldn't tell and didn't care. Ethan, please, let's go home and talk about this. Home, I echoed. Interesting you should mention that. I checked my watch, a deliberate theatrical gesture. Right about now, the lock should be changed. Your key won't work anymore. Madison blinked, confusion cutting through her drunken haze. What? Your personal items are packed in boxes in the garage. Everything else stays with me. The house is in my name, in case you've forgotten. You can't do that, she protested, her voice rising. That's our home. Was, I corrected. Was our home. Now it's my home, and you're not welcome there anymore. Derek finally found his voice. Ethan, this is extreme. You can't just... I've already transferred half of our joint account to a separate account in Madison's name, I continued as if Derek hadn't spoken. Exactly half, not a penny more. The rest is mine. The credit cards have been canceled. Your car is still in your name, so you can keep that. Madison was shaking her head, tears streaming down her face now. You're lying. You're trying to scare me. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and held it up for her to see. The transaction history clearly showed the transfer. Exactly half of our savings moved to a new account. Check your email, I suggested. You'll find the account information there, along with a letter from my attorney outlining next steps for the divorce. Divorce? Madison whispered, the words seeming to echo in the silent ballroom. Did you think there was another option? After this? I gestured around at the horrified wedding guests. You've made your choice, Madison. Now you get to live with it. I turned to the stunned bride and groom. Ryan, Sarah, I apologize for the disruption. Congratulations on your wedding. I wish you more success than I had. I reached into my jacket, withdrew an envelope, and handed it to Ryan. Your gift. I hope it's enough to make up for the entertainment we've provided. Then I walked away, straight and tall, not looking back even as I heard Madison call my name. I collected my coat from the check stand and stepped out into the cold Chicago night, breathing deeply for what felt like the first time in months. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Madison, of course. I declined the call, then another buzz, and another. I turned the phone off entirely and hailed a cab. Where to? The driver asked. Home, I said simply. The house was quiet when I arrived, exactly as I'd left it that morning. Except now, it was truly mine alone. I poured myself a scotch and sat in the darkness of my living room, waiting for the storm I knew was coming. It arrived sooner than expected. Not 30 minutes later, I heard a key scratching ineffectively at the front door lock, followed by pounding and Madison's voice, shrill with panic. Ethan, open the door. This isn't funny. I took another sip of scotch, making no move to answer. I know you're in there. Open the goddamn door. More pounding. A neighbor's light flicked on across the street. If you don't open this door, I'm calling the police. At that, I finally rose and approached the door, though I didn't open it. Go ahead, I called through the wood. Explain to them how you're trying to enter a house that isn't legally yours after publicly declaring your marriage over. Silence from the other side, then softer. Ethan, please, let's talk about this. We're past talking, Madison. Check your email. My attorney will be in touch. You can't do this. You can't just throw me out. I already have, I replied calmly. Your things are in the garage, as I said. The code is still the same. I'll have that changed tomorrow. Where am I supposed to go? Her voice cracked. I could picture her. Mascara streaked, the perfect red dress rumpled, hair falling from its careful arrangement. That's not my problem anymore, and I said. Perhaps Derek has room at his place. A choked sob. Derek won't even answer my calls. Imagine that, I said, unable to keep the satisfaction from my voice. Not so fun and exciting when there are actual consequences, is he? You planned this, Madison accused. You set me up. No, Madison, you did this to yourself. I just decided I wouldn't be your victim anymore. This is cruel, Ethan. This isn't you. You're right about one thing, I conceded. This isn't the man you married. He's gone. You killed him, piece by piece. Every time you lied, every time you chose Derek over me, every time you thought I was too stupid to notice. More sobbing now. I never thought you were stupid. No, just boring. Reliable, sturdy, boring furniture? Isn't that how you put it? I was drunk. I didn't mean it. Yes, you did. Alcohol doesn't create feelings, Madison. It just removes the filter that stops you from expressing them. A thud against the door. Her forehead or fist, I couldn't tell. What about our life together? 8 years, Ethan. Does that mean nothing? It meant everything to me, I replied, my voice finally betraying a hint of emotion. That's why I'm doing this. Because you took everything that was sacred between us and treated it like it was worthless. I made a mistake, she pleaded. People make mistakes. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is saying something hurtful in a moment of anger. What you did, what you've been doing, that's a choice, Madison. A series of choices, made day after day, to betray me. Silence again, broken only by the sound of her crying. Your things are in the garage, I repeated. Take them and go. And then what? And then we never see each other again. I walked away from the door, back to my scotch, listening as Madison's sobs eventually faded. A few minutes later, I heard the garage door open, the sound of boxes being moved, a car starting, then silence once more. The fallout was swift and far-reaching. Madison's world collapsed like a house of cards in a strong wind. She moved into a hotel initially, an expensive downtown place she couldn't afford but booked anyway, perhaps thinking this would all blow over quickly. It didn't. When Madison went to her office on Monday, she found herself called into an emergency meeting with HR. Someone from the wedding, likely one of Ryan's relatives who worked in Madison's company's legal department, had reported her behavior as concerning. She was placed on immediate probation, her major accounts reassigned temporarily. Her credit cards were declined when she tried to extend her hotel stay. The new account I'd set up for her had money, but not enough for the lifestyle she was accustomed to. Her car payment bounced. She'd forgotten I handled those automatic payments from my account. The lease was in her name, and the repo notice came quickly. Meanwhile, Derek had vanished. According to mutual friends, he'd requested an immediate transfer to his company's New York office, citing personal reasons. He'd blocked Madison's number, unfriended her on social media, and told colleagues he didn't want to be involved in the drama. The exciting man who'd made her feel alive had abandoned her at the first sign of consequences. Madison tried to fight back, of course. She hired an attorney, a second-rate one she could afford on her reduced income. She claimed I'd ambushed her, that the house was as much hers as mine, that she deserved more than half of our assets. Her attorney likely explained the reality, with documentation of my inheritance, funding the house with evidence of her publicly declaring our marriage over, with Illinois being a no-fault state where her infidelity wouldn't earn her sympathy from a judge. Her position was weak. She tried the social approach next, calling our friends, telling her version of events, painting herself as the victim of my calculated cruelty. This backfired spectacularly. Too many people had witnessed her behavior at the wedding. Too many had suspected her affair with Derek. Too many had watched me maintain my dignity while she lost hers. The court of public opinion ruled swiftly in my favor. Within a month, Madison was fired from her job. Performance issues, the official reason, though everyone knew the truth. She couldn't afford her attorney anymore and began representing herself in the divorce proceedings, making emotional appeals that fell flat against the methodical evidence my attorney presented. Victoria reported that Madison had moved to a small apartment on the outskirts of Chicago, all she could afford after losing her job. She was working at a high-end retail store, a significant step down from her executive position. Her car had been repossessed, forcing her to rely on Chicago's unreliable public transportation system. "She's desperate, Ethan," Victoria told me over coffee one morning. "She tried to reconcile with Derek, but he blocked her number. She's talking about moving back to her parents' place in Springfield, but they won't take her calls. They're deeply religious, you know. Divorce is one thing, but the affair—" "Not my problem," I replied, sipping my espresso. Victoria frowned. "Don't you feel even a little sorry for her?" "Why should I? She made her choices. Now she's living with the consequences. She still loves you, you know. That's what she keeps telling everyone." I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. "She doesn't know the meaning of the word." The final divorce papers were signed in early April. Madison didn't contest anything, which surprised my attorney but not me. She knew she had no leverage, no sympathy, no case. The woman who had once commanded rooms with her confidence was now a shadow, just trying to survive. I heard through James that Madison had lost her retail job. Apparently, she'd had a breakdown when a customer complained about her service. She was now waiting tables at a diner near her apartment, a far cry from her executive position. Her apartment building had bed bugs, her neighbors were loud, and the neighborhood wasn't safe after dark. She tried to reach out to old college friends, former colleagues, even distant relatives, anyone who might offer a lifeline. Most ignored her calls or offered empty sympathy without practical help. Her beauty and charm, once her greatest assets, had dimmed under the stress of her downfall. The Madison who had captivated rooms was gone, replaced by a desperate woman just trying to keep her head above water. It was a cold, rainy night, in late April when I received the call. James's voice was tense, controlled. "Ethan, there's been an accident. Madison, she's gone." The world seemed to pause. The air suddenly thickened my lungs. "What happened?" "She was driving back from a job interview in Milwaukee, some second-rate marketing firm that might have taken her on. The roads were slick from the rain. Witnesses said she was driving too fast for the conditions, probably trying to get back for her diner shift. She lost control on Lakeshore Drive, slid into oncoming traffic, hit a semi-truck head-on." James paused. "She died instantly. The truck driver is fine, just shaken up." I sat heavily in the nearest chair, my mind struggling to process the information. Madison, dead. The finality of it was absolute, irrevocable. "Ethan, you there?" "Yes," I managed. "I'm here." "I'm sorry, man. I know things were complicated, but I thought you should hear it from a friend." "Thank you," I said automatically. "The funeral is Saturday. Her parents are handling the arrangements. They asked if you'd come." I closed my eyes, seeing Madison as she once was, laughing, vibrant, the woman I'd fallen in love with, not the desperate, broken person she'd become. "I'll think about it." After hanging up, I poured myself a scotch and stood at the window, watching rain streak down the glass. It was the same kind of night Madison had died on. Cold, wet, treacherous. Had she been crying, distracted, or simply unlucky, a victim of Chicago's notorious spring weather and a car that probably wasn't safe on the best of days, let alone in a downpour? The police report filled in some details later. Madison's old Honda, purchased with the last of her savings after her lease car was repossessed, had bald tires. The witnesses described her driving erratically before the crash, too fast, switching lanes without signaling. The toxicology report showed no alcohol, but she was on prescription anti-anxiety medication that warned against driving. She'd been working double shifts at the diner, chronically exhausted, a perfect storm of factors leading to one fatal moment on a rain-slicked highway. I attended the funeral standing at the back of the small chapel. Madison's parents nodded solemnly when they saw me but didn't approach. The service was brief, sparsely attended. No one mentioned how she'd ended up alone on that highway. No money, no friends, driving a car that probably wasn't safe. No one needed to. The story was written in the faces of the few who came to say goodbye. Her sister Allison caught me as I was leaving. She asked about you, right until the end. Wanted to know if you were happy. What did you tell her? I asked. I told her I didn't know, that you seemed fine. Allison studied my face. Was that a lie? I considered the question. No, I am fine. She wasn't, Allison said simply. She never recovered from losing you. She didn't lose me, I corrected. She threw me away. There's a difference. Allison didn't argue, just nodded tiredly. I guess it doesn't matter now, does it? I sold our house and bought a sleek downtown condo with no memories attached. I expanded my architectural firm, taking on ambitious projects that consumed my days and nights. Life moved forward as it always does. Sometimes I think about that wedding where everything changed, about the choices Madison made and their consequences. Her story ended on that rain-slicked highway, her car crumpled against a semi-truck, her life extinguished in an instant. From respected executive to unemployed waitress. From our beautiful home to a bedbug-infested apartment on the dangerous outskirts of Chicago. From being adored by Derek to being abandoned by him when things got difficult. In the end, she lost everything. Her marriage, her career, her social standing, her lover, and ultimately her life. The perfect red dress she wore that night was replaced by a cheap uniform. The confident smile became desperate tears. The woman who thought I was boring furniture discovered too late that stability has its virtues. As for me, I survived. I rebuilt. I won. And whenever I hear about someone betraying their spouse, I think about Madison's final drive on that stormy April night, alone and desperate, racing toward a future that would never arrive.